Hello, students. Story time with Miss Sophie continues. We are going to continue reading Thimbleberry Stories. Today, I am going to read the second story, or the second chapter. It is Little Owl Redecorates. Nigel Chipmunk had many friends. There was Dipper, the hummingbird who lived down the lane. There was Mud Puppy, the salamander in Pass-Along Pond. Over the moon meadow were Cladius, the gator snake, and Copper, the snake, the butterfly. And of course, there was Little Owl, who lived all alone up in Haymaker Hollow. Little Owl was fussy. He tried to be pleased by things, but he never quite was. In winter, he wanted summer. In summer, he wanted spring. The apples were always a bit too tart, and the cherries rather too soft. But he was a good-hearted owl and a faithful friend. For these qualities, Nigel liked him very much. One day, when Nigel was replacing a few of the broken bricks on his chimney, Little Owl came swooping through the air and landed beside him. "Little Owl," said Nigel in the middle of the day, "shouldn't you be asleep?" Little Owl's feathers were standing straight up on his head, and his eyes were wide, and he looked very much awake. "I haven't slept in days," he said. "I'm redecorating, and I'm having a terrible time of it, Nigel. I've moved my bed 20 times already, and it still isn't right." Nigel looked more closely at Little Owl and saw the dark circles under his eyes. "You have dark circles under your eyes, Little Owl," he said. "You really should sleep." "Those are feathers, Nigel, feathers. We owls have dark circles, and what I need isn't sleep. What I need is a friend to tell me where to put things. Will you come to my house and tell me where to put things?" Nigel sighed. He really had hoped to finish the chimney this day, but Little Owl was in such a state. "Of course, Nigel. Give me time to wash up, and I'll be over by 2 o'clock. "Right-o," said Owl. He was very glad Nigel was coming, but too worried to smile. He gave a wave and flew home. Nigel went inside and poured some nice cool water into a basin. He scrubbed his face and hands with a bar of peppermint soap. Then he donned a little red scarf and some sturdy black walkers, and off he went. Haymaker Hollow was in the hills northeast of Thimbleberry Lane. It was a straight up walk, which could be pleasant in the cool of the evening, but midday in summer was quite a task. Nigel had forgotten to wear a hat against the sun, so he found a large plantain leaf and wrapped it about his head with a piece of corn silk. Luckily, he didn't pass anyone along the way who might laugh at him. He passed only a porcupine, who never laughed at anybody because she herself always looked a little silly. All those garish quills. When Nigel arrived at Owl's house, he found the bird leaning into a heavy sideboard and pushing it across the dining room. So there's his living room. It looks like a mess. Stuff everywhere. Even a box of dishes. Little Owl, exclaimed Nigel, "You are too small and feathery for such a job." He rushed over to help his friend. "Antiques," puffed at Little Owl. "I can't help myself. I'm afraid I should buy the lighter, more modern furniture, but I can't resist mahogany, you know." "I know," grunted Nigel, guiding the sideboard against the wall of the final push. "There," said Nigel. "Looks perfect." Little Owl stepped back. He said, looking it over. "Perfect," repeated Nigel with emphasis. While Little Owl pondered, Nigel gazed up at all the rooms in the house. The whole place was a disaster. Furniture shifted and lopsided, crockery and knickknacks all about, rugs rolled up and half rolled, and even a few out in the yard, obviously thrown through the window. "Little Owl, you need to sleep," said Nigel. "I think the sideboard should go there," said Little Owl, pointing to the other side of the room, which presently held an old Victrola. The bird's eyes were wide and shiny. "Let me fix you a cup of warm milk," said Nigel, leading his friend to an old leather armchair that had been temporarily shoved into a closet. "And that angel statue," said Nigel, pointing, "should go there." In time," answered Nigel, patting his friend's shoulder. "Just relax." The chipmunk had no trouble locating the milk, though finding Little Owl's stove was a challenge. But soon Nigel had 2 steaming cups in hand. He found a velvet hassock and sat down near Little Owl, who was surveying his house. His head spinning completely around. "Oh, no, 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 oh," whispered Owl, as he was no good at chaos, no good at all. "Little Owl, where was your sideboard before?" asked Nigel, sipping his milk. Little Owl pointed. "And your chaise?" Little Owl pointed again. "And where was the grand piano?" Nigel continued, asking where all the furniture had been in the first place, and Little Owl pointed. "And how did you like the furniture where it was before?" asked Nigel. "Oh, quite well indeed," said Little Owl, taking a drink of his milk and trying to smooth down his feathers at the top of his head. "It took me years to make it all work." "Well then, why did you want to shift everything about?" asked Nigel. "Because of the Gladiola," answered Little Owl matter-of-factly. "What Gladiola?" "That's a type of bird," asked Nigel. "That one there," answered Little Owl, pointing. Nigel looked across the parlor and across the dining room and across the kitchen to a small window beside the back door. And on the sill was a glass jar, and in the glass jar was a gladiola. "And what's wrong with the gladiola?" asked Nigel. "Nothing," said Owl, "but it's pink, and the only pink thing in the house is the French floor lamp. So I moved it into the kitchen near the gladiola to coordinate, you know. But when the Windsor chain didn't look quite right without the lamp, so I moved that. Then the hat rack didn't look right, so I moved that too. And then the next thing I knew, my furniture was everywhere, and my feathers were sticking straight up on my head, and I was sitting on your chimney in a daze. Nigel smiled, and he thought a bit. Little Owl, he said presently, I like gladiolas very much. Would it trouble you to let me have the pink one and take it home? Of course you may have it, said Little Owl. You are a dear friend. Then let us set it out by the gate so I won't forget it. Then redecorate. Certainly, said Little Owl, whose manners were always impeccable. He carried the glass jar with the flower out to the gate and left it there for his friend. Then he walked back into his house. Little Owl looked around and said suddenly, "Of course, the sideboard goes there." Nigel helped him push it. "Perfect," said Little Owl. "Now the grand piano goes there." Nigel helped him push that too. "Perfect," cried Little Owl. Nigel helped Little Owl push all the furniture back where it had been before. They returned all the knickknacks to their proper places and rolled each rug into its perfect position on the floor. When they were finished, Nigel took his pink gladiola and walked back home. It was evening now. He didn't need a plantain hat. He carried the gladiola near his nose to breathe its lovely fragrance. As he walked, he admired the moon and the stars in the sky. Nigel had a very good sleep that night, and his friend Little Owl had an even better one. He slept 4 days. But when finally Little Owl awoke, he flew first thing to see his friend Nigel, with whom he had cinnamon tea and raspberry buns, and a good laugh about all that furniture. Tomorrow is a new chapter, and there is no writing assignment again because I am still waiting for more people to finish the "and to think it happened on Highway 101" writing.